Shaquille Big Shaq. O'Neill walks back into Booker T. Emerson Middle School, expecting applause, but finds quiet segregation, dressed in school policy. The lunchroom isn't divided by fights, but by silence, hunger, and coded systems designed to fail certain kids before they ever get a chance. One girl's stare, one boy with no shoes, one locker hiding a letter no child should ever have to write. What starts as a scholarship visit turns into a reckoning, and when Big Shaq stands up, he brings the whole damn system to its knees. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. He hadn't walked those halls in 35 years, but they still whispered his name like a ghost. The paint on the lockers was different. The mascot had changed from a wildcat to something abstract and corporate. A falcon with a flame in its eye. But the air? It was the same. That blend of old floor wax, cafeteria grease, and childhood uncertainty. Shaquille O'Neal, Big Shaq, as the world knew him, stood at the front entrance of Booker T. Emerson Middle School, where once upon a time, a painfully tall kid with hand-me-down shoes and quiet eyes learned what shame felt like. His SUV idled in the parking lot behind him. A driver waited. Press kits had been prepared. A guidance counselor and a district PR rep were ready to escort him to the library for a community excellence assembly, where Shaq was supposed to drop a few heartfelt words and announce a scholarship fund bearing his mother's name. But Shaq waved them off gently, pointing toward the building with a single nod. "I need a minute," he said, his voice low and solid. And so he stepped inside alone. The front lobby had a slick, forced cleanliness to it. Fresh tile, shiny glass display cases, touchscreen sign-in kiosks. But Shaq's eyes scanned past all of it to the darker, older corners. The stairwells that still creaked. The mural of unity that looked suspiciously recent. And then, just down the east hall next to the boys' locker room, he saw him.
Mr. Coleman.
Same uniform, same broom. Older now, his beard fully gray, and his gait a little slower. But those eyes hadn't changed. Sharp, warm, full of quiet rebellion. They locked eyes. "Big Shaq?" Coleman said, as if testing a ghost. Shaq grinned, walked forward, and pulled the man into a one-armed hug. The janitor chuckled.
"I always told him," Coleman said, thumping his chest. "Told him that kid was gonna do more than just dunk basketballs."
Shaq's smile faded just slightly as he looked down the hallway beyond Coleman's shoulder. "You still here?" "Can't seem to quit this place," the old man replied. "But I seen too much to leave it in their hands." Shaq didn't press. He didn't need to. The unsaid things filled the space between them like smoke. "I'm just walking," Shaq said. "Mind if I—" Coleman nodded, gesturing toward the hallway. "Watch your step. Some ghosts still bite." Shaq moved slowly through the corridors. Locker doors clanged in the distance, but the main hallway was mostly quiet. A few kids peered at him from classroom windows, their faces lighting up in recognition. He lifted a gentle hand in return, but didn't stop walking. He passed the gym, where the sounds of sneakers on wood stirred old aches in his knees. He passed the art room where Miss Darnell used to hang his sad, oversized clay animals. The memories weren't warm, they were sharp and precise. Not trauma exactly, but something close. The kind of emotional scar that never fully itched but always reminded. He finally turned the corner and reached the cafeteria. The wide double doors were propped open, and the smell of reheated food was strong. Something tugged at his stomach, not hunger. Something colder. He stepped inside. The room was filled with students. It was lunchtime, but it was unnervingly quiet. No food fights, no laughter. Just controlled murmur, low conversation, like a room that had forgotten how to breathe. And then he noticed it. The students weren't just eating in silence. They were separated. On one side of the room, near the serving line, a group of mostly white students sat at tables with trays full of better quality food, colorful, warm, plated differently than the rest. They had drinks with actual labels. Some even had wrapped sandwiches from outside vendors. On the opposite end, the brown and black students sat in tightly packed rows with plain trays, bland pasta, limp fruit cups, half-filled cartons. No one seemed surprised by this division. That was what struck Shaq the most. It wasn't tension, it was normalcy. He moved slowly down the center aisle, and a few heads turned. A teacher seated at a monitor, anxiously watching the room, stood up halfway, recognizing the famous face. But Shaq kept walking. He looked at the servers behind the counter, 2 of them wore blue aprons, and one had a scowl deep enough to cut paper. She gave Shaq a glance, then immediately turned back to scrubbing a tray. The white kids laughed louder as he passed. Not mockingly, just comfortably, as if they knew they were protected by the right side of the room. Then he caught sight of a girl, tall, thin, with deep brown skin and tired eyes, sitting with an untouched tray. She stared at him not with awe, but with recognition. Not of the celebrity, but of the man, as if something inside her had been waiting for this moment. Shaq stopped near her table. The girl didn't speak. She just slowly pushed her tray away from her, keeping her eyes on his. The message was clear. This food isn't right. This system isn't fair. We've been living like this for too long. A boy beside her whispered, "That's Big Shaq." The girl didn't smile. Shaq turned to look at the rest of the cafeteria again. He noticed a chart on the wall. Rotational lunch access. Some kind of color-coded system that supposedly dictated lunch seating. He narrowed his eyes. His gaze found the lunch monitor. A thin woman with tightly wound hair and a name tag that read Keen. She looked away. And just like that, the scholarship ceremony, the press photos, the polished speeches, they all vanished from his mind, replaced by the weight in his chest. He walked out of the cafeteria and back down the hallway, faster now. His long stride echoed. He didn't look back. Outside the cafeteria doors, Coleman stood waiting. "You saw it, didn't you?" the janitor asked, his face somber. Shaq nodded. "Been like that for about 2 years," Coleman muttered. "Principal Gates says it's performance-based meal optimization. I say it's dressed-up segregation." Shaq clenched his jaw. Why didn't anyone say something? Some tried. Got labeled troublemakers. Staff got moved. Parents got stonewalled. The smart ones stopped asking. Shaq stared at the wall, fists at his sides. "And the kids?" Coleman sighed. "They just learned to survive it. You remember how that feels." Shaq didn't answer. He didn't need to. In that moment, everything inside him aligned. Old wounds, present clarity, and a fire that had never fully gone out. "I didn't come back for this," he said finally. "But maybe I came back because of it." Coleman looked him in the eye. "So what now?" Shaq looked back toward the cafeteria doors. He could still hear the quiet murmur of students eating meals, served by a system designed to sort them before they ever had a chance to choose. "Now," he said, voice low and steady, "we stop pretending not to see." And with that, Big Shaq turned and walked toward the administration wing, past the lobby, past the displays, straight to the office with the nameplate Principal Julian Gates. The next chapter had just begun, and Big Shaq wasn't here to make speeches anymore. He was here to make things right. A few minutes later, a girl white, wearing a volleyball jacket, stepped up. Her scream glowed red. The staff immediately pulled out a sealed deli box and slid it across the counter with a smile. Shaq had seen a lot of forms of segregation. This one was dressed in data and school policy, but its bones were the same. He turned back toward Miss Keene, who now stood a little straighter. He walked over slowly and stood in front of her, arms crossed. "Can I help you, Mr. O'Neill?" she asked, voice tight but steady. Shaq lowered his voice. "That rotation board. Who designed it?" Keene looked down briefly, then back up. "Principal Gates. He called it a merit-based incentive system. Started it last year." Shaq nodded slowly. "And that merit tracks with race, doesn't it?" She swallowed. "I've raised concerns." His gaze didn't flinch. "And? They told me if I had a problem I could ask for reassignment. Or keep my job and focus on operational execution." Shaq's jaw clenched. She glanced around the room and stepped slightly closer. "He'll say it's based on behavior reports and GPA. But the referrals? Those come from the same teachers who think raised voices are aggression. Same ones who send kids out of class for wearing hoodies. The GPA numbers, they're tied to who gets after-school tutoring and who gets suspended. It all circles. And nobody pushed back? Some parents tried, but they're ignored. Or told their kids are on improvement plans. And they don't want to lose what little support they have, so they stop coming." Shaq's eyes flickered to the tables again. He saw a younger boy, barely 10, sitting alone, poking at a tray that looked barely touched. His eyes were glazed over, not angry, not sad, just used to it. That was the part that hit hardest. "How long's it been like this?" Shaq asked. Keene paused. "Almost 2 years. It started small, seating charts, goal lunches. Now, it's every day. The kids notice. They just don't ask anymore. Shaq exhaled. It wasn't loud, but it was long. The kind of breath that carries history. I want the data, he said. Keen blinked. What data? Color-coded seating, discipline referrals, lunch access, demographics, everything. I want to see the full picture. She hesitated. That could get me fired. Shaq leaned in slightly. You said it's been 2 years. You've been watching this happen. That means you already have it. Silent. Then she nodded. Once. Sharp. I'll get you what I have, she said. But if you're going to expose this, don't just show up for the cameras. Don't just post a tweet and walk away. Shaq's eyes didn't move. You're not here for cameras, he said. I'm here because I remember what it feels like to be that kid eating last. Miss Keene stepped back and folded her arms. She didn't smile, but her expression shifted. Like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't carrying this weight alone anymore. Shaq turned, his mind spinning. The cracks weren't just in policy, they were in leadership, in culture, in the bones of the school itself. The cafeteria was just the most visible scar. But what was beneath it, that was what needed cutting out. He walked toward the hallway exit again, slower this time, scanning each table, letting the image sear into his memory. The laughter on one side, the silence on the other. He didn't need to be told anymore. He'd seen enough. As he exited, he passed the schedule board again and paused. He grabbed a nearby marker and, without permission, wrote something on the bottom of the rotation list in big block letters. You can't grade hunger. Then he uncapped a red marker and circled it twice. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Every smile hides something. Principal Julian Gates just hit it better. He had the kind of face you'd see on a local morning show. Trim beard, clean fade, smart suit with school colors in his tie, and a grin that could glide across controversy like ice on glass. He extended a hand the moment Shaq stepped into his office, framed by plaques, leadership awards, and motivational quotes printed in glossy block letters on the wall. Mr. O'Neill, what a tremendous honor. Or should I say, Big Shaq himself, Gates said with a polished chuckle. I can't tell you what it means to have you back at Emerson. Shaq took the handshake. His palm swallowed the principal's entirely. Appreciate the welcome. Please sit. We've got coffee, water, fresh fruit, whatever you need. Shaq declined with a small shake of his head. Just time. That's what I'm here for. Gates gave a genial nod and motioned toward a pair of chairs near his desk, sitting opposite Shaq with the easy posture of a man who'd led many meetings just like this. But Shaq wasn't interested in ceremony. His eyes scanned the room. Pictures of Gates with school board members. A framed article titled The Mind Behind the Model, Restructuring Success at Emerson, and a whiteboard checklist titled Behavior Trends Review. I've been touring, Shaq said slowly. Seeing the place. It's changed. Gates smiled wider. We've made a lot of progress. Modernized infrastructure, performance-based tracking, student incentive initiatives. Emerson is becoming a model for behavioral excellence. Our rotation system has even been cited at district conferences. Shaq's eyebrows lifted slightly. The lunch rotation. Among other things, Gates said quickly. It's a pillar of our engagement strategy. We found students responded better to tangible performance benchmarks. It's about accountability and reward-based structures. Gives them something to work toward. Shaq nodded once. And who decides what they work toward? Or how they get judged? Gates leaned forward, unbothered. It's a combination of academic metrics, behavioral logs, and teacher evaluations. We've built a transparent, data-driven system. Shaq gave a tight smile. Transparent to who? There was a pause. Not long enough to call attention, but just long enough to be telling. Gates answered, to faculty, staff, and administration. Parents can request their child's metrics anytime. We've been very clear about the process. Shaq leaned back, hands folded. I saw 2 kids today. One got a deli sandwich with bottled water. The other had cold pasta and carrots. They're both 12. You telling me one of them earned being treated like a person and the other didn't? Gates' smile dipped just a degree. It's not about value, it's about achievement. We're preparing these children for a results-driven world. Shaq's voice was quiet, but anchored. Or teaching them they're only worth what someone else decides they are. Gates offered another practiced chuckle, though it didn't land quite as comfortably this time. Mr. O'Neill, I assure you, there's no discrimination happening here. All our practices are equity reviewed. Shaq didn't blink. Equity reviewed by who? Internal committees, Gates said, already starting to pivot, and we're in talks to partner with an external firm next year for a full evaluation. Shaq nodded slowly again, but there was no trust in it. You know what I see when I look at those kids split up in that lunchroom? I see data in disguise. You took the language of reform and dressed up the same old stuff, just slicker, harder to point at. Gates smoothed his tie. With all due respect, you're here for a celebration, right? The scholarship? Shaq's gaze sharpened. I was. But now I'm here because something smells wrong. There was a silence then, dense, unblinking. Gates broke it with a firm, performative rise from his seat. Well, if you have concerns, I'd be happy to set up a walkthrough with our student services team, or provide documentation on how students are evaluated. Shaq stood too, towering over him. I'll do my own walkthrough. Gates didn't move, but his jaw clenched for the briefest moment before relaxing again. Of course. Anything we can do to support. Shaq left the office without another word. Outside, the hallway was humming again. Students moving between periods. Bell just having rung. Shaq's steps were slower this time, more intentional. His body moved, but his mind raced. He took a side corridor and found his way back toward the staff lounge, where lunchroom aides and paraprofessionals usually took their breaks. He slipped inside without knocking, drawing startled glances from the few staff present, 2 women and a man, seated around a cramped table with coffee cups and folders. Mr. O'Neill, one of the women said, surprised. I'm not here long, Shaq said, his voice warm but steady. Just need a few answers. Off the record. They exchanged glances. You're safe in here, he added. The youngest aide, mid-30s, denim shirt, tired eyes, spoke first. You're talking about the lunch system. Shaq nodded. The man sighed. It's a joke, a cruel one. Kids lose lunchtime for everything. Late homework, speaking out, even for being over-energized. They call it behavior management. I call it selective starvation. The second woman chimed in. It didn't start like that. It started with these focus periods and earned breaks. Then came the coded tracking. Then came the food tiers. Now we don't even argue. You fight it, you get hours cut. Who decides who gets punished? Shaq asked. Teachers submit referrals. Some do it right. Others don't. Shaq's eyes narrowed. And the ones who get flagged the most? The room was quiet. The denim shirt woman finally said, they're mostly black boys, some Latino, sometimes girls with learning needs. Shaq didn't react outwardly. But something in his core tightened. Do parents know? They think it's about discipline plans. Most of them are working 2 jobs. Some don't speak enough English to navigate the portal. Shaq nodded once. Thank you. He left the room, but not the weight of what he'd just heard. It followed him down every hallway, echoed behind every locker click and classroom murmur. This wasn't a misstep. It was design, a system rooted in the illusion of fairness, but rotting beneath the gloss. He found his way back to the cafeteria near the end of the lunch period, standing near the exit as trays were being cleared. A small group of students lingered at the far end, waiting for the next rotation. Among them was a boy in a gray hoodie, face blank, eyes glazed. Another, smaller boy beside him whispered something, and they both glanced toward the line, then toward the staff desk. Shaq watched as the screen lit up in front of the boy with the hoodie. Gold. Again, he took the same basic tray he'd had the day before. Shaq took out his phone, snapped a photo, not for social media, for truth. As the room cleared, he stepped toward Miss Keene again. I talked to the principal, he said quietly. And? She asked. He's got a great smile, Shaq said. Doesn't mean a damn thing. Miss Keene nodded slowly. I've got the data, files, screenshots, logs. Not just from lunch, from behavior systems, suspensions, even tutoring access. Been collecting for months. Shaq looked her straight in the eye. You trust me? She hesitated, then nodded. I think I have to. He handed her a card. His foundation's private contact line. Upload it all here, encrypted. My team will review, and I'll take it from there. Miss Keene slipped the card into her pocket. You sure about this? It's not just policy, it's people. Powerful ones. Shaq's voice was quiet, but unshakable. I'm not afraid of power. I'm afraid of letting this keep going. He walked out without another word. In the distance down the hallway, Principal Gates watched him from behind a half-open door. His smile faded now, controlled, measured. but not gone. The war wasn't loud, but it had started, and Big Shaq had just picked his side. Still, she hesitated. Then finally, she sighed and swiped her keycard. The light turned green. The lock clicked. Shaq gave her a grateful nod and stepped inside. Melody hovered by the door, clearly uneasy. "You don't have to wait," Shaq said without looking back. She lingered a second longer. "Be careful what you find." Then she slipped out and pulled the door shut behind her. Shaq turned to the cabinets, scanning the labels. Behavioral incidents 2012-2015. Suspensions 2016-2019. Academic referrals 2020-22. He moved to the cabinet labeled 2015-2020 and pulled the drawer. Inside were dozens of student files, each in its own folder, tabbed with names, ID numbers, dates. He grabbed 5 at random, laid them on the metal table, and began flipping through. The patterns didn't scream. They whispered, cruel and methodical. Black student. Referral for disruption. Verbal correction escalated to in-school suspension. Latino student. Accused of defiance. No video evidence. Suspension with no parental appeal noted. White student. Identical behavior. Received a warning. No suspension. Noted as enthusiastic. He opened more and more, and the rhythm became undeniable. He found internal notes written by teachers, language that read like judgments, slow to comply, aggressive tone, unfocused, likely attention-seeking. One had a doodle of a stick figure, with a hoodie, captioned troublemaker. Shaq's hand tightened around the folder. Then he found a spreadsheet tucked inside one file, hand-typed, apparently forgotten. It listed suspensions by year, alongside race and gender. White students suspended. Black students suspended. Hispanic students suspended. Other 2. Meals. White. Black. Hispanic. He kept flipping. Another sheet. This time sorted by reason. Disruption 80. Dress code violation 90%. Insubordination 92%. Same infractions, different consequences. Shaq let out a slow breath, the kind that felt like it was pushing history out of his lungs. He pulled out his phone, took photos of the pages. Careful, steady, not for exposure. Not yet. For protection. For truth. Then he noticed a drawer beneath the main cabinet labeled confidential, reviewed cases. He opened it. Inside were red-stamped folders, legal reviews, family letters, appeal attempts. One caught his eye. Jaden Wills. The name was familiar. The boy on the steps. No shoes. The one who never spoke. Shaq flipped through the file. Jaden had been suspended 5 times over 2 semesters. Reasons listed included aggressive posture, excessive absences, verbal outburst. But the notes were sparse, many unsigned. The final page was a parent letter, handwritten. "I am begging someone to help my son. He is not a bad child. He is tired. I work nights. We don't have much, but he is a good boy. Please stop punishing him for being poor." It wasn't even responded to, just filed. Shaq stared at the letter for a long time. Then he gently folded it back into the folder and slid it into his bag. This was no longer just about numbers. It was about names, stories, kids who had already been decided against before their first mistake, kids who didn't even know how to ask for better. He looked around the room one last time. It wasn't dust that weighed down the air in there. It was decades of silent complicity, of locked-up shame, sealed behind administrative language and policy binders. Shaq stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him, meeting Melody again at the end of the hall. Her arms were crossed tight across her chest, like she already knew what he'd found. "They told me those were archived due to space," she said softly. "They were archived to be forgotten," Shaq replied. She glanced up. "Are you going to report it?" "I'm going to do more than that." He handed her back the access badge. "Keep watching," he said. "I'll need people like you when this starts getting loud." Melody nodded, her eyes uncertain but steady. "Then I'll be ready." Shaq walked back through the empty hallway, past the polished glass trophies and fresh paint. But he didn't see any of that anymore. All he could see were folders, letters, forgotten kids whose only mistake was being visible in the wrong way. The cafeteria had been the wound. This was the infection. And it was time to start cleaning it out. He had everything, except what they stole from him: dignity. The afternoon sun had slouched behind the school's north wall, casting a stretched shadow across the concrete steps out front. The building, once humming with energy, now stood still. Only the squeak of a far-off mop bucket and the fading thrum of a distant school bus hinted that life had existed there. Just an hour earlier, Shaq had stepped outside for air, not expecting to find anyone left behind. But there he was, a boy, small, still, barely a movement to him, sitting on the third step from the bottom, head down, back hunched slightly like someone older than 12. His feet were bare, dark soles caked with dirt and tiny cuts. No backpack, no lunchbox, just silence. Shaq slowed as he approached, that ache in his chest already forming. He remembered that kind of silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that came from giving up on being heard. He stopped a few feet away. "You waiting on someone, big man?" The boy didn't look up, just muttered, "No. You always sit here this late?" "Sometime." Shaq glanced around. No cars. No one from the school. Just an empty lot, broken pavement, and a cracked sidewalk that led to nowhere quickly. He lowered himself onto the step beside the boy, moving slow like someone who knew how to earn trust without asking for it. "What's your name?" "Jaden." Shaq nodded. "I'm Shaquille. People call me Shaq." "I know," Jaden said quietly. "You played for the Lakers." Shaq grinned softly. "And the Magic. And the Heat. But yeah, most people remember the Lakers." A pause. Jaden finally lifted his eyes just enough to glance at Shaq's shoes. Clean Jordans. Not flashy, but solid, stable. "You ever come to school with no shoes?" the boy asked. Shaq's smile faded, just slightly. "Yeah, once. 6th grade. I tried to hide it by wearing double socks. Got caught anyway. Kids laughed so hard I didn't come back for 3 days." Jaden nodded like he already knew that story. Like he'd lived the same one, over and over. "I didn't forget," Shaq added. Jaden's voice was quiet, but sharper now. "They suspended me last week for disruptive body language. I didn't even say anything." Shaq tilted his head. "What'd you do?" Jaden shrugged. "I was tired. My head was down. Teacher said I was ignoring her on purpose. She sent me out. Again." Again. The word hit harder than anything else. Shaq took a breath. "You live nearby?" 3 blocks. Apartment with my mom. She works nights. Usually picks me up, but her car broke down. "No siblings? Just me. I wait till she gets off. Sometimes I go to the corner store, but I don't like when it gets dark." Shaq nodded slowly, the weight in his chest growing heavier with every word. "I saw your file," he said, careful not to sound like a threat. Jaden flinched slightly. "I'm not here to judge," Shaq said. "I just want to know the truth. From you." Jaden looked away again. "They treat me like I already messed up. Even when I try. Like I'm just here to take up space. Like they already decided who I am." Shaq let that sit between them for a long moment. "They talk to my mom like she's stupid. She's not. She just doesn't have time for their meetings. They always call during her shift. Then they act like she doesn't care." Shaq didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. The truth didn't require an echo. "You ever see the lunch lists?" Jaden asked, changing the subject like kids do when they've been hurt too many times to stay in one place emotionally. "They color code us." "I've seen them," Shaq said. "Gold means you don't get extras. Red means you do. I was red once, for like a week. Then I got bumped to gold. My friend said it's 'cause my GPA dropped. But I was sick." Shaq clenched his jaw. "That happened often. Mostly to kids like me." Shaq nodded. Then, as if something in Jaden cracked open, the words started spilling. "Jason got suspended for not tucking in his shirt. Darius got written up for staring too long at a teacher. My friend Zoe's mom had to fight to get her off a behavior plan because she talks loud. And Jayla, she got called aggressive because she asked why she couldn't eat in the front section."
You're what?
Shaq listened. Every word, every name. Like gathering stones for a foundation. "They all say it's about rules. But it's really about who gets to be comfortable here, and who doesn't." Then he added the line that carved itself into Shaq's memory forever. "They give us numbers before they give us chances." Shaq closed his eyes, briefly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed protein bar. Quietly, he handed it to Jaden, who took it without hesitation. "You eat today?" Shaq asked. Jaden shook his head. "Didn't want to. They make you feel weird when you go back for seconds." Shaq nodded, and they sat there in silence as Jaden unwrapped the bar and took slow, careful bites, like someone who'd learned not to waste food. A breeze moved past them, brushing dust across the sidewalk. A few minutes passed. Then something unexpected happened. One student showed up. Then two more. Then five. All heading toward the front steps, quietly, like moths drawn to a safe light. Jaden noticed too. They didn't say anything at first, just stood nearby. Some sat. One girl leaned against the railing. Another boy kicked at pebbles with scuffed sneakers. Their eyes flicked toward Shaq, but mostly settled on Jaden. "Y'all here for the meeting?" Jaden asked, half joking. A girl named Micah replied. "He told me he met you." Shaq looked at Jaden. Jaden shrugged. "I said you were different." Micah sat next to him. "You really gonna help?" Shaq didn't answer with words. He stood up, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He opened it on his palm. It was the data report from the archive, the one with suspension breakdowns by race. Another page listed coded phrases used by teachers and referrals. The kids leaned in, reading carefully. "They've been using this against us," one boy asked. "They've been hoping you wouldn't see it," Shaq said. Micah whispered, "My mom always said something felt wrong. But when she asked questions, they made her feel dumb." Shaq crouched down, eye level with the kids. "You're not imagining any of this. You're not overreacting. You're not broken." Jaden stood, shoeless still, and looked directly at him. "So what do we do now?" Shaq looked across their faces, young, raw, hungry for something no policy had ever offered them. Respect. "We start talking. Loud. To the right people. With the right eyes watching." A car horn honked in the distance. Jaden glanced over and saw an old sedan pull up, the engine clunking. His mother stepped out, wiping her hands on a fast food apron. She looked around nervously, saw the group, and froze slightly. Shaq stepped down the stairs and introduced himself gently. "Miss Wills?" She nodded, wary. "I'm with the foundation. We're doing some work with the school." She looked at Jaden, who nodded slowly. "I know you work hard," Shaq continued. "I just wanted you to know he's not invisible anymore." Her eyes welled before she looked away, brushing her cheek quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. Jaden climbed into the car. Shaq watched them drive away. The steps emptied again, but something had shifted. A charge in the air. Not anger. Something deeper. Like the sound of old systems cracking under the weight of truth. Shaq didn't leave. Not yet. He turned back toward the building. Tomorrow would be louder. And he'd be ready. They didn't know he was coming. That made it even better. The address came from a quiet tip. An email sent anonymously to Shaq's foundation inbox. With a single line. "Tonight, 7 p.m. Patriot Oaks Golf Club. Private PTA strategy meeting. No press. No faculty of color. No subject line. No sender name." But it didn't need either. After everything Shaq had seen inside Booker T. Emerson Middle School, the cafeteria division, the data in the archives, the silence on every administrative floor, he knew the real conversations weren't happening in boardrooms. They were happening in side rooms, behind closed door, with wine glasses, and coded words. He showed up alone. No press, no driver, no security. Just Big Shaq in a black sport coat, baseball cap pulled low, walking through the manicured hedge-lined entrance of the club like he belonged there. Because in a way he did, not by their definition, but by purpose. The woman at the check-in table outside the meeting room looked up, startled. "Sir, I'm sorry, this is a private function." Shaq didn't even break stride. "I know," he said, and walked right in. The room was modest, fancy but familiar. Round tables dressed in white linen, soft jazz playing in the background, and a projector screen with the words "Community Visioning for Student Excellence," framed in bold. There were about 30 people inside, all white, most in business casual. The tone in the room was one of polite tension, not a fundraiser, not a celebration. A war room dressed like a brunch. No one noticed him at first. He stood near the back, behind a half wall of decorative greenery, listening. A woman at the front, mid-40s, blonde bob, pearl necklace, was already speaking. Her name tag read Susan Langley, PTA exec chair. "We've heard the board's reassurances, but let's be clear," she said firmly. "This is not about equality. This is about maintaining order. The school environment has shifted dramatically, and our children are being penalized for trying to learn while others are allowed to disrupt." Murmurs of agreement. Another parent raised a hand. A man with slicked back hair, a private firm logo on his vest. "And let's not pretend like this is accidental. This lunchroom chaos, These so-called equity adjustments. It's a slippery slope. Our students are losing their edge. A woman to his left chimed in. I caught my daughter sharing her lunch with one of the cafeteria kids last week. I told her we help through the system, not through pity. Shaq's jaw locked, but he stayed silent. Then came the phrase that hit like a nail dragged across glass. Maybe it's time, Susan Langley said, to talk about performance-based resegregation. Not by race, obviously, no one's saying that, but by behavior, by standards. A man added, we're not racists, we just want our kids to be safe, to thrive. We've paid for this district to perform. Someone chuckled near the bar. The new lunch schedule's already doing half the work. That was it. Shaq stepped forward, the floor creaking beneath his weight. The room quieted as heads turned, one by one, until 30 sets of eyes landed on him. Susan's smile dropped. Oh, Mr. O'Neill, I wasn't aware you were invited. I wasn't, Shaq said, calm and unblinking. But I heard there was a conversation about kids happening without the kids. No one spoke. He stepped closer to the front, unhurried, like a storm cloud that had decided it was tired of circling. I listened to everything, he said, voice quiet but cutting. I heard the code words. I heard the worry. I heard the fear dressed up like policy. But you can stop pretending this is about performance. He looked straight at Susan. You said your kids are being disrupted. What's disrupting them? Hungry classmates? Tired classmates? Kids whose parents don't own 2 cars and can't afford private tutors? Or is it just the fact that they have to sit next to a reality you never wanted to explain? Susan stiffened. I think you're misinterpreting. Shaq held up a hand. No, I'm translating. Big difference. He turned to the rest of the room. You want order, fine, but don't build it on exclusion. Don't preach structure when your structure is designed to fail certain kids before they walk through the front door. The man in the vest cleared his throat. Mr. O'Neill, with respect, we're not trying to hurt anyone. We're just advocating for the students who behave. Define behave, Shaq shot back. Is it silence? Is it not asking questions? Not pushing back when treated like a problem instead of a person? Because I've seen those files. I've seen what gets labeled as aggression. It's voice. It's eye contact. It's existing while being black or brown in a space that wasn't built for you. Someone shifted uncomfortably. A chair creaked. He moved toward the projector and picked up the remote, clicking a button. The screen behind him flickered. Shaq had emailed the image to himself that morning. It was now projected in full clarity. The discipline report from the Student Development Archives. Bars of color-coded suspension data. A silent visual indictment. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. This isn't opinion, Shaq said. This is fact. And if you're okay with it, then you're complicit. And if you're not okay with it, then why are you whispering in country clubs instead of speaking up in school board meetings? A woman in the back rose, arms folded. We didn't come here to be shamed. Shaq nodded. No. You came here to protect a version of comfort. But comfort doesn't build justice, and silence doesn't feed hungry kids. He let the weight of that settle. I met a boy today, he continued. No shoes, no food, 5 suspensions. You want to know what his crime was? Being tired, being hungry, being poor in the wrong zip code. The room held its breath. I sat next to him, heard his story, and I saw myself. Because I was that kid once. And you know what saved me? One adult, one janitor, one teacher, one person who didn't label me before listening. He stared around the room, making sure every eye met his. I came to this school to give a scholarship, but now I'm here to do more. I'm here to peel back every layer of polish you've painted over this place. If this school wants to claim excellence, it's going to have to earn it the right way. No one dared interrupt. Shaq stepped away from the screen and began to walk out, but stopped at the door. One more thing, he said without turning around. If your kids are so excellent, maybe it's time they start learning how to sit next to someone who's still trying to survive. That's the real test. He pushed the door open and walked into the night. Inside, the room stayed frozen. No music, no chatter, just the long, guilty silence of a mirror finally being held up. Shaq didn't smile. He didn't need to. He was done asking. Now he was demanding. She was tired of whispering truth behind her badge. It was time to scream it. It was just past 6 p.m. The school building had thinned down to echoes and cleaning crews. Shaq had been pacing the edge of the empty gymnasium, processing what he'd heard the night before at the PTA meeting. The elitist smugness, the veiled bigotry, the thinly disguised language meant to repackage segregation. It had all settled into his bones like concrete. He knew systems could lie, but the parents, they had told the truth. Ugly, naked, and without shame. He was about to head toward the parking lot when he heard quiet footsteps and a hesitant voice. "Mr. O'Neill?" Shaq turned. It was her. Miss Keene, the wiry lunchroom monitor, with the soft eyes and the edge of weariness under her skin. She wasn't in her uniform now, just jeans and a fleece zip-up, her school ID clipped to the waistband like a forgotten apology. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set like she'd made a decision she couldn't undo. "I didn't know if you'd still be here," she said, walking closer. "I'm still here," Shaq replied, his voice steady. "I need to talk to you." Shaq nodded and gestured toward the bleachers. They sat down on the lowest bench, far from where their voices could bounce off the walls. She glanced around as if someone might still be watching. "What you said at the meeting," she began. "I wish I had the courage to say it myself. But I'm not you. I don't have a foundation. I don't have a name." "You've got something more important," Shaq said. "You've got the truth." She smiled just for a second, and then pulled something from her coat pocket. A small black USB drive. She turned it over in her palm like it was burning her hand. "This has everything," she said. 2 years of it. Logs, screenshots, cafeteria seating assignments, color tier breakdowns, incident reports, audio notes, staff emails. I started collecting after I noticed the same kids being shuffled to the end of the line week after week. Shaq took the drive. Gently. "You sure about this?" She nodded. "I've already been reassigned twice just for asking questions. They moved me from the front line to tray scrubbing, told me it was rotation. But I knew it was punishment." Shaq's voice lowered. "You ever go to Gates?" She gave a dry laugh. He smiled, told me I was brave, said change takes time. Then 2 weeks later, I wasn't invited to the staff planning meeting. He stopped responding to my emails. I got the message. Shaq stared at the drive in his hand. It was small, light, but it felt heavier than anything he'd carried that week. She shifted on the bench, hands clasped tightly. "You need to understand. They designed it to look fair. They used buzzwords, equity, merit, behavior plans. But it's all targeted. Kids with learning differences, kids from Section 8 housing, black and brown boys with single moms. They're always the first on the adjustment tracks. They call it scaffolding, but what they're building is a trap." Shaq looked at her, the sadness and anger behind her eyes clear now. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 12 years. Started as a substitute, then became full-time. I've seen principals come and go. But this one? Gates is different. He's smart, slick. He doesn't make noise. He makes policy. You can't fight it because it doesn't scream. It just whispers until you believe it's normal." Shaq ran his fingers over the drive, feeling the weight of every story inside it. "There's more," she said. "Last month we started seeing lunch trays changed midweek. On Mondays some kids would be red tier. By Wednesday they'd be gold. They said it was due to behavior updates. But when I asked for the criteria, they said it was confidential. Meanwhile, I saw one teacher refuse to let a kid go to lunch early because she didn't like the way he looked at her. That same kid, Marcus Tate, he got bumped to gold for a week. His mom tried to meet with someone. She was told to contact Student Culture and Conduct Services. No one ever called her back." Shaq clenched his fist. Miss Keene's voice softened. "I just couldn't keep watching it happen. The kids stopped talking about it out loud. That's what scared me most. They just accepted it, like it was their fault." Shaq exhaled hard through his nose. He'd seen a lot in his life. In locker rooms, in courtrooms, in boardrooms. But nothing made his skin crawl like kids learning how to carry shame that wasn't theirs. She looked him dead in the eye. "Don't let this die here," she said. "Don't let it become one more thing people look into and then forget about. If you're going to expose it, do it with teeth, because these people don't care unless it hurts their image." Shaq nodded. "I will." She stood up then, tucking her hands in her coat. "They'll come after me, you know. When they find out." "They won't," Shaq replied. "Because by the time they see what I'm doing, they'll be too busy trying to explain themselves to people they can't ignore." She gave him a soft smile, but her eyes were wet, not from fear, from relief. As she walked away, her footsteps light. Shaq sat there for a long time, alone, listening to the quiet, thinking. This drive was more than evidence. It was a matchbook, and he was ready to light the fire. He walked to his SUV, opened his laptop and plugged the drive in. A folder popped up instantly, labeled An Injustice 2023 Final. Inside, 78 categorized incident reports, 24 screenshots of email exchanges between staff, 9 PDF files of cafeteria seating logs, 14 audio recordings labeled by date, 1 folder titled Red Tier Rotation. Unofficial notes. He opened the last one. Inside was a spreadsheet, created by a staff member named Darren Cleary, labeled Lunch Tier Weekly Projections. The column labeled Priority for De-escalation was color-coded. Every name highlighted in yellow had a checkmark under Cultural Conflict History. Nearly all of them were Black or Latino. Shaq scrolled. Names, grades, notes like speaks loudly, lack of compliance, needs structured silence. It was all there. All the rot dressed up in digital polish. He hit Save As and copied the entire folder to a secure server his foundation used for confidential reports. Then he called Jamila, the civil rights lawyer, on retainer. She picked up on the first ring. "You said you'd need me this week," she said. "I need you tomorrow morning," Shaq replied. "Bring 2 interns. We're building a case." She didn't ask for details. She just said, "I'll be there." He ended the call and sat back. This wasn't about going viral. It was about systemic truth. Shaq had walked into Booker T. Emerson to give kids a scholarship. He was going to give them something better now. A reckoning. And it was coming. Shaq leaned into the mic, his voice steady and low. "I came here to give out scholarships, to recognize the kids who rise, even when the system stacks the deck against them." He paused. "But what I found instead was a system designed to make sure some of them never even get to the table." A hush dropped over the crowd. He pulled a sheet from the folder Jamila handed him. "This is from the Student Development Archives. Internal suspension data over the last 5 years. Black students make up 38% of the student body, but they account for 81% of suspensions. 81%. And when we break it down further, the infractions include phrases like defiance, disruptive posture, and verbal tone. You want to know what those words mean?" He looked up. "They mean being tired, being hungry, being frustrated, being black." The crowd shifted. Some gasped. A teacher's hand covered her mouth. Shaq continued. "I've seen the cafeteria footage. I've seen the rotation charts, the color coding, the rationing. The lunch is determined not by need, but by a ranking system that favors privilege, not progress." He held up another paper, a screenshot. "This is an internal cafeteria schedule. Students classified by color, red tier, gold tier, blue tier. Sounds neutral, right? Except 92% of gold tier students are non-white. And red tier students, they get outside food, better trays, longer time, more comfort. The system is gamed, and it's disguised as performance-based access. That's not just bad policy. That's weaponized inequality." Murmurs began rising. Parents were now at the front, eyes darting toward the school windows. Shaq looked directly into one of the cameras. "I'm not naming names today, but I am naming the pattern. When you punish hunger and call it behavior, when you gatekeep opportunity behind false metrics, when you dress bias in buzzwords, you're not educating, you're selecting, and you're excluding." Behind him, Jamila stepped forward and placed a large envelope on the podium. "These documents have been submitted to the State Board of Education and the Department of Civil Rights," she said. "Formal complaint, citing racial discrimination, inequitable access, and a pattern of selective enforcement. We're demanding a full audit, effective immediately." Reporters began shouting questions. "What's the school's response? Will there be resignations? Are these policies still active?" Before Shaq could answer, a side door flew open. Principal Gates emerged, walking briskly toward the front. His face was calm, but his movements had the edge of someone trying to contain a house fire with a garden hose. He stepped to the podium, face tight with a forced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand there's been a misunderstanding. Emerson Middle has always operated with fairness, equity, and high academic standards. Any suggestion to the contrary?" Shaq turned to him slowly. Calm. Control. "You still want to do this in front of cameras?" Gates faltered. "Just a beat. I have nothing to hide," he said, voice straining under the pressure. Shaq handed him a folder, then explained this email chain, sent from your office. instructing staff to flag underperforming students who exhibit persistent behavioral patterns without defining those patterns. And here, right here, you told a teacher to remove unnecessary escalation logs from report. What was unnecessary about the truth? Gates' face lost its color. A reporter shoved a mic closer. Mr. Gates, are you confirming these documents? Gates stammered. We're still reviewing, these are taken out of context. Shaq leaned toward the mic again. They always say that it's out of context, that it's complicated. But let me tell you what's simple. He pointed toward the school. There are kids in there who haven't had a full meal all week. There are kids who've stopped raising their hands because every question gets labeled attitude. There are kids who've never been late, but get marked absent because their names get skipped in roll call. The cameras zoomed in, and every day we wait for another report or another apology. They get smaller, quieter, until they disappear. Not from the school, but from their own belief in themselves. Shaq stepped back. Jamila and Calvin took over, distributing press packets, USBs with documentation, video stills, and links to the encrypted drive Miss Keene had compiled. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Yun, fix Emerson, lunchline bias. Shaq for justice. The district's media coordinator tried issuing a statement, but was drowned out by parent testimonials. Mothers stepped forward, clutching letters they'd sent to the school months ago, that were never answered. One father spoke about his son being assigned to silent lunch for asking why he couldn't sit at a different table. Teachers began stepping out of classrooms to listen from the steps. Even students began gathering by the fences, phones out, eyes wide. And for the first time they saw someone standing for them. Not in a suit behind a podium, but in sneakers, built like a wall and speaking truth that shook foundations. Shaq didn't stay for the whole press wrap. He slipped out the side after giving Jamila a nod. Let the cameras do their job. Let the evidence speak. He walked the perimeter of the building, past the cafeteria where it all began. The lunch tables were empty now, but they still looked divided. That would change. It had to. As he rounded the corner, he saw a familiar face, Jaden Wills, sitting on the same steps where they'd first met. But this time he had shoes on, a backpack, and something different in his posture. Hope. Jaden stood when he saw Shaq. Was that all you? Shaq smiled. Nah, that was you. Jaden grinned. Just a little. Then looked past him toward the cluster of media vans. You think it's gonna work? Shaq nodded. Not today. Not tomorrow. But yeah, it's already started. They stood there in silence. Not the silence of defeat. The kind that comes before a wave hits. Because the storm wasn't over. But now, it had a name, tucked behind rusted metal. A truth too painful for a child to carry alone. It was supposed to be a closing moment. Shaq had already said his piece. The media had packed up. The civil rights lawyers were preparing their brief. The district was in damage control, issuing the same templated responses they always used when the fire got too close. Shaq had lingered on campus longer than anyone expected. Not for strategy, not for glory, just to sit with the weight of it all. He'd done interviews. He'd shaken hands. But something in his gut said he wasn't finished. Not yet. So he circled back. One last walk through the building. One last step through the halls that had whispered too many unspoken stories. And like gravity, the cafeteria pulled him in again. It was quieter now, empty except for a lone custodian, wiping down tables, and a few students who hadn't yet left for the day. He stood still in the doorway, watching. There was something haunting about the place after hours. The trays were gone, but the memory of the divide still hovered like an old scar. That's when he noticed the boy. Levi. Small-framed glasses slightly tilted, hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands. He'd been silent every time Shaq had seen him. Not shy, just silent, like he lived behind a glass wall he couldn't or wouldn't break through. Now he stood near a row of lockers, staring at one with a kind of frozen stillness that made Shaq's chest tighten. He walked over. You all right? Levi didn't answer at first. Then he glanced up and spoke so quietly. Shaq had to lean down to hear. There's something in there. I think you're supposed to see it. Shaq looked at the locker. The paint was chipped, the hinges rusted slightly. Number, whose locker is this? He asked. Levi hesitated. It was my brother's. Shaq's stomach dropped. Zeke. That name had been in one of the files. Expelled last year. Persistent behavior disruption. No follow-up. No re-entry plan. No support. He's not here anymore, Levi added. He left last spring. Shaq studied the locker. Left could mean anything. Levi shifted his weight, then added in a flat whisper, he died in October. Nobody ever said anything. Shaq froze. How? Levi swallowed. Took himself off the list. That's what my mom said.
There were no tears. No dramatic silence. Just a kid too young to carry grief that big.
Shaq gently put a hand on the locker and nodded once. Can I open it? Levi reached into his pocket, pulled out a small key, and handed it to him. Shaq opened the door slowly. Inside, dust and papers clung to the metal like ghosts. A few torn notebook pages, a broken pen, and one folded sheet, neatly tightly pressed. Shaq pulled it out carefully. Levi spoke again, still not looking up. He told me if anything ever happened to give that to someone who'd actually see it. Shaq unfolded the paper. It wasn't long, just one page, but each word landed like a punch to the ribs. To whoever finds this, my name is Ezekiel. David Green, but they called me Trouble. That became my name in this place. Trouble when I asked questions. Trouble when I laughed too loud. Trouble when I cried at my desk. I got written up for being tired, for being late because the bus broke down, for wearing the same hoodie too many days in a row. They said I had an attitude. I didn't. I had no one to talk to. They told me I had behavioral issues. What I had was hunger. What I had was rage that nobody saw me, unless I made noise. Every time I got suspended, I fell further behind. Every time I came back, the teachers looked at me like I didn't belong. One called me a liability. That word stuck to me like a curse. I stopped trying. One day I counted how many kids who looked like me had red tier trays. I stopped at 19 because I knew it wouldn't matter. They told me if I worked harder, I'd earn my way back. But you can't earn your way out of a game designed for you to lose. This place killed something in me long before I ever left it. So if you're reading this, just know I was here. I was real. I tried. Tell Levi I love him, and tell the school they don't get to forget me. Shaq read the letter once, then again, and again. His hands didn't shake, but something inside him cracked. He turned to Levi. Thank you for trusting me. Levi just nodded and stepped back, his eyes locked on the floor. Shaq folded the letter carefully and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket. By the time the next school board meeting started, 2 days later, the room was full. Parents, reporters, lawyers, some teachers, even a few students. The media had quieted down since the initial firestorm. But this wasn't just about press anymore. It was about legacy. Principal Gates sat near the end of the table, eyes hollow but defensive. He knew what was coming. He just didn't know how sharp it would cut. When it was Shaq's turn to speak, he stepped forward slowly. No visual aids this time. Just that letter in his hand. He didn't address the board right away. He turned to the audience, to the parents, to the faces who'd been told their kids were challenging, to the mothers who were called uncooperative, to the fathers who were told they were too emotional. I've read reports. I've shown you data. I've handed over charts and graphs, and color-coded proof of what's been happening here. But sometimes you don't need another metric. He held up the folded sheet. Sometimes, you just need one voice. He unfolded the letter and read it aloud.
No interruptions, no coughs, no shifting in seats.
Just silence. And by the time he finished, there were tears in the room. Real ones. Even some board members couldn't meet his gaze. Shaq looked directly at them. You allowed this, he said, voice still calm. You wrote policies that made children feel invisible. You enforced rules that punished the symptoms of poverty. You made data more important than dignity. You called it reform. I call it erasure. He placed the letter on the table before them. That boy is gone. But I won't let you forget him. And I promise you, I'm not leaving until this place is rebuilt, from the lunch line to the front office, from the PTA to the hallway cameras. I'm not here for applause. I'm here to change the damn game. The board president shifted, clearly rattled. Mr. O'Neill, we will be reviewing. Shaq cut in. No more reviews. Action. I want an external equity audit. I want disciplinary policies frozen pending investigation. I want every file re-examined. And I want Levi Green's name on the memorial wall. The room erupted into applause. Shaq didn't smile. He just turned and walked out. Because the truth had finally spoken. And this time, they heard it. Same cafeteria. Different world. 6 months had passed since the day Shaquille O'Neal read a dead boy's letter into the record of a stunned school board. 6 months since cameras packed up, lawyers filed motions, and community members once polite and passive, started speaking with sharper words and louder conviction. In that time, Booker T. Emerson Middle School had become something else. Not perfect, but honest, bruised and rebuilding. A place no longer afraid of mirrors. Shaq hadn't been back since that day. He didn't need to be. The right people were moving. Systems were bending. But today he returned, not with fire, not with pressure, but to witness the growth planted by truth. He arrived just before noon. Same as the first time. No fanfare. Just him in a navy bomber jacket. A manila envelope tucked under his arm. A few students spotted him from the parking lot and ran ahead, excitement buzzing. But Shaq didn't rush. He walked slowly, soaking in the new air of the building. It felt different, lighter, warmer. The ghosts of silence still lingered, but they were quieter now, shrinking. The walls had changed. Where once there were dull motivational quotes and dated posters, now hung murals painted by the students. One was of Zeke Green, Levi's brother, framed by the words, "See us, hear us, believe us." It wasn't polished, but it was powerful. Next to it, a plaque, Zeke Green, Youth Equity Fellowship, founded by the Emerson Student Voice Council. Shaq stood in front of it for a moment longer than he planned. Then he moved on. The cafeteria doors were open, and this time there was no line drawn down the middle. No silent division. No hierarchy in seating. What greeted him instead was laughter. Real, layered, free. Students of every color, every style, every story, mixing like a symphony without a conductor. The tables had been replaced. Round instead of rectangular. No ends, no centers, just open space. A boy stood near the front, clipboard in hand, talking to a small group of visiting parents. Tall, slightly taller than before, with sharper posture and a quiet confidence that had grown roots. Jaden Wills. He spotted Shaq and smiled wide, motioning him over. "Shaq," he called out. The parents turned, surprised to see the NBA legend strolling in like he belonged. Shaq gave them a polite nod, then clapped Jaden on the shoulder. "You running the place now?" Jaden shrugged with a grin. "They call me Student Equity Chair. But yeah, kinda." Shaq chuckled. "Heard about the panel. That your idea?" "Sort of. Miss Keene helped. Said we needed students to be at the table. So we made our own. Lunch tables turned into round tables, huh?" "Exactly." They stood at the edge of the room, watching a few younger students pass food trays across to each other like a ritual of care, not survival. On the walls, new signage explained the unified lunch model, where all students received the same options: locally sourced meals, rotating menus, allergy-conscious choices, no color tiers, no rotations, no shame. Miss Keene spotted them from across the room and walked over. Her posture was straighter than before, eyes sharper. Her badge now read, Director of Student Wellness and Inclusion. "You made it," she said with a knowing smile. "Wouldn't miss it," Shaq replied. "How's it feel?" She looked around. "Still a fight every day, but it's a fair one now. We're not hiding the cracks, we're filling them." Shaq turned to Jaden. "How's the council working?" "We meet twice a month," Jaden said. "We do reviews on lunch experiences, teacher feedback, and student discipline fairness. We got a peer mentorship thing now, too." "And the locker check-ins?" Shaq asked. Miss Keene nodded. "Rolled out last month. Every student gets a wellness check, bi-weekly. It's not invasive, just a quiet talk. Eyes on them. Not to control, but to care." Shaq nodded. "That's how it should have always been." Jaden looked at him, quieter now. "You really think we're gonna keep this going?" After the attention fades, Shaq reached into his jacket and pulled out the manila envelope. He handed it to Jaden. The boy opened it carefully. Inside, a certificate. Jaden Wills, recipient of the Lucille O'Neal Courage Scholarship. His hands trembled slightly. Shaq placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's 4 years. Tuition. Room and board. Anywhere you want to go." Jaden's voice cracked. "I don't even know what to say. You already said it. Every day you came back. Every time you told the truth. You earned it before I even showed up." Miss Keene wiped her eyes quickly, pretending to check her clipboard. Across the room, Levi stood beside a new student mural in progress. This one had no faces, just hands of all shapes, sizes, and colors, building something together. He saw Shaq and gave a small wave. Shaq returned it, no words needed. As he turned to leave, he took one last look at the room. The same cafeteria where shame had once sat quietly at the back, now hummed with something new, belonging. A student ran by, nearly tripping over her untied shoelaces. A teacher helped her tie them without scolding. Another group of students gathered in a circle, sharing snacks without being told who could or couldn't. It wasn't perfect, but it was true. Shaq stepped out into the light, the air crisper than it had been 6 months ago. He didn't stop to take pictures. He didn't wave to anyone else. He just walked toward the future, knowing that his work at least here wasn't finished, but had finally begun to matter. From silence to voice, from bias to belonging, from one man's return to a community's rebirth. If this story moved you, don't scroll past it. Speak up in your own community. Ask how your schools track discipline, how they serve lunch, who gets labeled, and who gets left behind. Change doesn't start with permission. It starts with people who refuse to stay silent. Be one of them.